Part 1. My parents are dead. I should start there. They died a week ago. And of course I'm sad, but the grief isn't quite the crushing weight it should be. Perhaps it's because I was an only child, and we were emotionally distant, though geographically close. They were both professors, kind, frugal, thoughtful, incredibly intelligent, but utterly devoid of emotional expression. As the sole heir, I received everything. They had a decent income, meaning their combined assets were just enough to cover the inheritance tax on the house, which I then moved into. I began clearing out their accumulated, valueless clutter, and they had a lot of valueless things then, moved on to organizing the books in the living room, which had been my bedroom 18 years prior. One book caught my eye. Most of them would be donated to the library or charity, or simply tossed, but I thought this one might be valuable, if for no other reason than it looked over 100 years old. I opened it to a random middle page and skimmed a few lines. "If you are reading this, Peter, it means we are dead." I immediately slammed the book shut and scanned the silent room. What the hell? What were the odds of my name appearing randomly on any page of a book in my parents' house, right after their deaths? I hadn't marked the page, so I couldn't find the context. To be honest, I didn't want to. But in the end, I opened the book again, choosing a page at random, like dealing cards. "You need to calm down, Peter. There is a demon in the room." I slammed the book shut again, placed it on the bed, and walked towards the door. Of course, it was locked, despite having no lock. I discovered this frustrating fact during my hormone-addled teenage years. I inherited my parents' logical mind and enough emotional coldness to understand what I should do. I turned back, picked up the book, and opened it again. "Peter, there isn't much time. It's trying to break through, probably under the bed." Instinctively, I looked under the bed. Nothing unusual. Wait, there was a thin, barely perceptible wisp of smoke. Damn it. "Read, Peter," read on. "You must prevent it from entering. Your father knows the logical part of you wants an explanation, but that same logic also reminds you that the explanation must wait. Now is the time for action." Damn it, they knew me too well. I tried to ignore the thickening smoke and read quickly. "In the wardrobe on the other side of the room, you will find a pocket watch, a rosary, and a box of Morton salt. Get them now." I went to my old wardrobe and opened it. I rummaged through various trinkets. Why would my parents keep a bird skull until I found an Elgin pocket watch and the box of salt, but no rosary. My eyes scanned the page again. "In your dresser drawer, Peter, in the far corner where you used to hide your magazines." Clearly, this was my mother's writing, and I would definitely need therapy for this later. I opened the drawer, reached past the false back, and retrieved a smoky onyx rosary. The smoke had begun to choke me, and flames were now flickering from under the bed. "Sprinkle salt around the bed, son, and do it now." That must have been my father's handwriting. I really wanted to sit and look through the next few pages. These words weren't appearing as I read them. They were already there, in faded, old ink, clearly present for a long time. Was anything else written there? No time for questions. I sprinkled a circle of salt around the bed. At first, I felt foolish as nothing happened, but then I realized the billowing smoke was contained within the salty perimeter around the bed. Only the residual smoke in the room was what had spread before I made the circle. Now back to the book. "You must hold the demon at bay, Peter. Stop the watch and hold it in your left hand." I looked at the pocket watch. It certainly looked 100 years old. Its silver plating had a single winding knob. I pulled the knob. The ticking stopped. I held it in my left hand. "Keep it there, son. Take the rosary in your right hand." My father's style. He was the only one who called me son, and he always had a talent for perplexing me because he never cared if his actions were annoying. How could I hold the book, the rosary, and the watch with only two hands? I clumsily tucked the book between the hand holding the watch, ignoring the growling resonating from under the bed, from my childhood. The book kept shaking as I read. "The demon is contained. Remember that. It is important. Now it will rise." Do you know that feeling when you open an oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit and a blast of hot air hits your face? Imagine that vapor emanating from your bed. I ignored the figure standing directly in front of me. I was scared to death, but if I let go of what I was holding, fear would be all that remained. I was so afraid I couldn't stop reading. The next part requires courage, Peter. You must face the demon. No one else in the house can do it, and if it escapes, it will be nearly impossible to recapture. I closed my eyes, I counted to 5. My father always told me to do that when things got bad. By the count of 5, I was out of options. Read on or not, only read on. With the hand holding the rosary, reach through the fire. It will hurt. Grab the demon by the neck. No, 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 no. I ran towards the door. It was still locked. When I was a child, my father used to read me the poem, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. I didn't understand anything, but my parents never showed emotion, neither disappointment nor praise, so I didn't know if he was upset with me. He only explained that most people are content to be nobodies in life and don't bother to become great. I said it sounded absurd and asked why anyone would want that. My father simply replied with his usual dry logic that I wasn't the most popular kid in school, nor the best at sports, nor did I have the highest grades. I answered no to all. He then concluded, if you have no ambition to be the best among a few hundred children, how can you expect to be great in the adult world? Is it because you are comfortable staying where you are? So many things hit me at once. My parents were dead. Their story was over. Someday my life story would also end. Did I really want to live a life constantly afraid of loss? And if I eventually lost everything, what was the point of playing it safe? I stood up, raised the watch, and advanced towards the demon. It had the shape of a man, indistinct yet clear in the fire. He looked at me and smiled. I wrapped the rosary around my fist and squeezed, then wrapped my arm around his neck. The heat was terrible. He glared with hatred but didn't resist, as if his limbs were bound. I tightened my grip on the watch. I knelt and pulled him forcefully to the floor. Strangely, I was strong enough to hold him down. The demon groaned. Damn, it hurts. Temporarily ignore the pain, Peter. You must open the door. The words on the page were blurry with tears of pain. Fumble under the floor and search. I reached deeper under the bed. I was sure my hand was melting, but then I felt a handle and pulled it hard. Wedge the handle into the gap between the box spring and the bed frame. The book continued. A distant part of my brain suddenly realized my parents must have known about the demon gate under my bed, and that led to countless questions to explore later. After wedging the door open, I withdrew my hand in agony, but forced myself to read on. I wanted everything to end so I could just roll over and groan in relief. Push the demon into the hole. That was all it said. I looked into its yellow eyes, momentarily confused. Then I understood. It was afraid. I didn't know what I was fighting for, but I suddenly became acutely aware of my own strength. I grabbed the demon's neck, pressed it into the hole, and it fell through. Its screams echoed as it plummeted. I closed the lid. For the next 5 minutes, I simply curled up, crying and clutching my right hand. Only later did I realize the smoke in the room had almost completely dissipated as the pain subsided, but didn't vanish. I checked my hand. It wasn't scratched at all. I opened the book again. This time, I didn't bother to find the old page. The pain in your hand will linger for a while, son, but physically, your hand will be fine. The pain comes from somewhere else. I suddenly remembered my father's limp during the last 5 years of his life, with no explanation for why he suddenly became afflicted. I turned back to the book. That is your temporary burden. Let it go. There is much to do ahead. My parents' chapter ended so abruptly. The next page was a chapter from a completely unrelated, extremely boring novel. I flipped back to the previous chapter. My parents' words were still there, unchanged. The book didn't seem altered at all. Now what? I only knew that everything that seemed important before suddenly couldn't hold my attention for more than 5 seconds. To be honest, if you told me my former life, my bank account, car, job, friends, everything had suddenly vanished forever, I'd probably be fine with it. I might even feel relieved in a way. There was a bigger fish, a whale, swimming in the ocean of this existence. I had no idea what it was, but I intended to catch it. It was time to search my parents' house. Part 2. It was time to search my parents' house. Just one book seemed to have overturned everything I knew about time and space. What else were they hiding in this house? Both were professors, but neither was in theology. My father was a professor of English literature, and my mother was a physicist. Damn, it sounded illogical, or maybe very logical. I was still too bewildered to ponder it, and my hand still stung as if being tormented by Satan's hemorrhoids. Distraught, I walked to the top of the stairs, sat on the first step, and flipped through the book. I didn't know if I hoped the words would still be there or vanish inexplicably. In truth, I didn't know which outcome would be more logical. No, that's not right. I knew I wanted to find those words again. I wanted to explore that strangeness. Something was calling me, and I wanted to answer. I found them, scattered throughout the book, the advice that had guided me earlier. Rereading it now, nothing made sense because the story wasn't interspersed with demon confrontations or terrifying scares anymore. So that content had been there all along? God knows when it appeared and was published, how many years before I was born. I didn't know what conclusions to draw. I decided I would read the entire book thoroughly, at least 1,000 pages. But surely the answers were in there. I closed the book and walked downstairs, mentally calculating the time needed to delve into my departed parents. My parents were in the kitchen. My mother was sprawled on the table, pale, her torso split open like a taco dropped on the ground. My father stood behind the table, a checkered napkin wrapped around his wrist, holding a knife and fork, working diligently. He was eating my mother's intestines. His face was contorted in a grotesque smile of perverse pleasure as the knife jabbed through sinew and bone. The lower half of his face was smeared with blood. He continued his steady, slow carving, then looked up at me, his eyes never leaving mine. He speared a slimy piece of cartilage onto his fork and transferred it to my mother. She took the fork into her mouth, slowly chewing her own flesh. Then she, too, turned her gaze to me and smiled broadly, one eye socket empty. I screamed, or at least tried to, and lunged towards the cupboard behind me. I fell to the floor with a thud. The cupboard door burst open, and pots and pans clattered down on my head. I scrambled to my feet, frantically grabbing for anything: the pocket watch, the rosary, anything. I shoved my hand into my pocket, but only found my car keys. I brandished them in front of me as if they were enough to protect me from the horrifying sight I just witnessed. I tried to focus on what was happening on the empty table. I was alone in the kitchen, the only moving object being a single aluminum lid spinning on the floor. Perhaps demon hunting was harder than I thought. I sat on the living room sofa, a steaming cup of chamomile tea beside me. It was hard to say if I was unconsciously mimicking my parents' habits or for some other reason, but perhaps emulating them wasn't as bad as I'd thought when I was 17. The book lay open on my lap. I didn't bother to find a specific page. I just flipped to a few pages near the beginning and started reading. That scene must have shocked you greatly, Peter. You were just attacked by a demon upstairs, and it has harmed you in a non-physical way. You must also realize that what you saw was all in your head, but that doesn't make it any less real. You need to find a way to heal yourself, otherwise, that wound will permanently affect your untrained mind. I slammed the book shut. There was nothing like my mother's blunt comfort when you're feeling down. I paced back and forth in the room. I was standing at a damn crossroads. If I continued following my parents' trail, things would only get deeper. There would be no turning back. I suddenly wondered what had led my parents to the decision they must have faced. I imagined them discussing my fate. I saw my father saying that the fear of death gives birth to things that never existed, and that fear itself is a type of demon. My mother, with her boundless logic, would undoubtedly reply that death exists no matter what we do, and that every person born is inherently given a deferred sentence. They were both right, and if I chose not to proceed now, it wouldn't save my life. I would still die, and at that point, the only thing I'd have left was the ability to say I did it. I returned to the sofa and opened the book. Start with the smallest demon, son. My father's advice ended the chapter without further explanation. Damn it, I racked my brain trying to figure out what the smallest demon meant. Had my father ever mentioned a demon, I used to cry back then. Buster Duncan punched me really hard and stole my 3 toy soldiers. He choked me until I was forced to submit. When he let go, I ran straight home. In a rare moment, my father acted like a normal person. He hugged me as I sobbed. He's the worst person in the world, Dad. He makes me feel small. He's a demon, I wailed through my tears. Yes, son, but don't let him control you. If that's how he lives, if causing others pain is his joy, then he is the smallest person in the world. Buster Duncan was the worst kid I knew growing up. He lived only to torment the children around him, despite my father's comforting words. The kid was clearly much older than us, having been held back twice. I was lucky enough to live on the same street as him. I wondered if he was still in that rundown shack at the end of the road. What do stupid people do when they grow up? I reached his house in less than 5 minutes. It looked even more decrepit than when I was a child. Beyond 3 rusty cars and an artistic collection of weeds was a screen door, from which wafted the strong smell of old cigarettes and an indescribable scent of weariness. I knocked and heard a grunt from inside. Buster's mother, looking miserable just to be alive and annoyed by visitors, shuffled out, crumbs of food falling from her oversized, shapeless robe. "Yeah," she rasped by way of greeting. "Hi, ma'am, you're Mrs. Duncan, right? I'm an old friend of Buster's from when we were kids. Is he, could I see him?" She eyed me suspiciously for a few awkward seconds. "He's out back," she finally croaked, her voice raspy from cigarettes. I awkwardly followed her through the dilapidated house towards the back porch. She plopped back down on the sofa. Buster Duncan stood grinning in the backyard, which was basically just a patch of dirt bordering the woods. He was even bigger and fatter than ever, but more than that, I realized he was still as mean as he used to be. Those eyes, anyone who's ever been beaten by a bastard recognizes them immediately. "Buster," I said slowly, walking down the porch steps, "I don't know if you remember me, I'm Peter." I stopped about 10 feet from him. "You used to call me Faggot Lips back then." His stupid grin remained unchanged. "I'm here to say something, to exorcise a demon, if you will." I gripped the pocket watch in my left pocket, my right hand clenching the rosary. "You made me afraid to walk down this street when I was a kid. The bruises on my arms were so bad that the CPS once came to our house to question my parents about hitting me." I smirked faintly. CPS probably thought no one as bland as my parents could ever make a fist. His gaze didn't change, his hands clenching and unclenching in an agitated way. "But not just that," I continued, my voice slightly choked. "You made me afraid of my own existence. You made me believe there was something inherently bad, something perverse about Peter that deserved to be hit. It sounds like childhood bullying, but it devastated my self-esteem, making me think I was weak and therefore deserved to be hit more. It was only much later that I understood you were the one who was wrong." My breath hitched, tears welled, and I couldn't stop them. "I can't stop you from being petty. I can only choose not to allow myself to become smaller, so now I want to say what I should have said a long time ago." I stepped closer, just a few feet from him, standing at eye level with his massive chest. "I forgive you, really," I sighed. "I choose to banish this demon." It was then I noticed his eyes were yellow. The demon roared and swung a fist at me. I was too startled to pull anything from my pocket, only managing to stare wide-eyed as the punch landed on my chin and bounced off, causing no harm. The demon shrieked, clawing at me frantically, yet not even ruffling my sleeve. I stood there, stunned, as it grew increasingly enraged, hitting harder and more futilely. Then it let out one last, loud roar, burst into flames, and turned to flee into the woods. The only thing in my mind at that moment was the astonishment of how tiny it looked as it vanished into the shadows. I turned back towards the house, imagining his mother coming out to see what the commotion was about. She didn't appear. Then I noticed something on the ground that I hadn't seen before. It was a granite headstone. I walked closer. Buster Duncan, born Jan 10, 1979, died Jan 9, 2013. There were no other words. I stood there staring for a long time. Finally, I opened the book. The passage before me was the last line of a chapter. "There are many ways to go out into the world and face the wandering demons, son. They can destroy your physical body. Your father and mother ended their lives that way. Always remember that any battle worth fighting is one you risk losing. But killing them is impossible. Not entirely impossible. As long as there is a demon living within us, no weapon will be effective. That is why your father had to tell you that the demon you pushed back into the hole last time was not harmed, only banished, and it is probably very angry with you now. Be careful and remember that we are proud of you." Of all the words in that damn book, that last sentence shook me the most. As I turned the page with my right hand, I realized it no longer hurt. I smiled. The next chapter was titled Into the Deep Woods. I frowned. It was getting dark. I remembered as a child thinking that heroes embarking on great adventures surely never felt fear. They must begin their journeys because they know they are blessed with the strength to face any challenge, and those who hear their stories tremble because they only hear, they do not do. I concluded that the greatest hunters simply weren't afraid. And then I realized, as I tiptoed into the woods at dusk, with only a book, a watch, and a few rosary beads in my hands, that I was terribly wrong. I was scared stiff. Part 3. I was scared stiff. I hadn't brought anything to prepare for a trek through the woods. The little remaining light was only borrowed time. I felt foolish. But if I didn't follow every word the book instructed, I might be dead by now. I gambled, choosing to face the unknown rather than abandoning my faith in the book. Onward. I stepped across the dirt path that ran behind every house in the neighborhood, separating the woods from the residential area. At first, I could weave through the trees quite easily, but the deeper I went, the denser the foliage became, and the darker it got. Soon, I was almost completely enveloped in thick darkness. I saw an opening ahead, the faint moonlight piercing the gloom just enough for me to make out the surrounding trees. I headed that way and reached it within a few minutes. Just as I was about to step into the clearing, a face appeared at eye level, peeking from behind a tree trunk. I screamed actually. I shrieked, but this time I didn't foolishly brandish my car keys like a magic charm, as they had proven useless against the demons in my head. Instead, I pulled out the rosary and the pocket watch, holding both up in front of me in a heroic stance. It was just a missing person poster tacked to the tree. The paper was weathered, a picture of a smiling bald man. Last seen about 3 weeks ago, and the name, Gordon. The words were faded by rain and sun. I let out a dry, relieved chuckle. "Oh, Gordon, sorry man," I mumbled. "If you've been missing for 3 weeks and people think you might be in these woods, you're probably dead." I stepped into the clearing, feeling a little guilty about my humorous reaction, but seriously, today had been awful. The moonlight was just enough for me to open the book and read on. "Step forth, my son, to free those who are imprisoned." The passage ended a chapter. I was annoyed. I had just gone through an arduous journey to free a demon within myself. Didn't my father realize that? I sighed, continued across the clearing and deeper into the woods. At first, I felt a little spiritually noble as I pressed forward, tearing through the darkness to find the light. It sounded poetic. By the 6th stumble, I started getting irritated. The previous messages were all quite clear. Maybe I had misunderstood this one. Perhaps Into the Deep Woods was just a chapter title and I was overthinking it. I turned to go back, but damn it, it was pitch black in every direction. I couldn't go back, nor could I go forward because I no longer knew which way was which. Of course, I'd left my phone at home. I punched a tree branch, hurting my hand, then just picked a random direction and walked. As I stumbled and tripped over roots, hitting my head on tree trunks hidden in the dark, I reflected on how foolish I'd been to think that salt and a pocket watch were enough to prepare for an adventure. Oh, and I'd forgotten the box of salt. Maybe I was still overestimating myself. I desperately wanted to open the book, but there was no moonlight penetrating here anymore. All I could do was keep wandering. My patience and sense of purpose completely vanished when I saw another clearing emerge in the distance. I was so glad I almost ran into it, but then a low branch whipped hard across my head, knocking me to the ground. That moment was also when the exhilaration from having banished a demon completely disappeared. I scrambled to my feet, limping into the clearing, annoyed with my parents, just like when I was in high school. I reached the clearing. At first, I saw nothing noteworthy, so I plopped down to rest and then I heard breathing. A wheezing breath echoed from somewhere indistinct, clearly not human. I jumped up, spinning in every direction looking for a large, ferocious monster. Instead, I saw a small, tiny creature. The wheezing came from a fox cub lying on its side, one leg caught in a trap. It looked like it was on the verge of death. I looked around the clearing, making sure there was no one else. It seemed it was just me and the fox. The steel jaw trap was clamped tightly around the fox's leg, and around it were dark, dried bloodstains. Clearly, it had been trapped for a long time. I approached, intending to play the hero and rescue it, and failed. Those traps are damn hard to open, and perhaps that's their purpose. Finally, I discovered I could use my heel to press down on one side, prying up the other to slightly separate the jaws. I pulled the trap towards me to free the fox's leg, allowing it to escape, but the fox didn't move. It was too exhausted, almost dying. I tossed the trap aside and reached out to pet it. The damn thing snapped and bit my hand. I yelped, pulling my hand back, swearing profusely. It didn't get up or move further. I wasn't bleeding. I guess the bite was a warning, so I carefully checked the fox again. It was dead. The final shock of being forcibly removed from the trap, then its feeble attempt to defend itself, was the last straw for its ravaged body. I sat down on a rock, silent for a while. I used to walk through these woods with my father. We would just be silent, yet feel connected. It sounds strange, but that silence brought us closer. As I grew into my teenage years, those walks in the woods became less frequent, then stopped altogether. In that melancholic moment, I realized I couldn't remember the last time we walked together, and I secretly wondered how I would have felt if I had known it was the last time. I missed my parents. I picked up my parents' book, using the moonlight to read. The Death of the Fox shows that physical liberation and spiritual liberation are often intertwined. Never face a demon without remembering this, Peter. I looked at the fox, still open-mouthed, eyes wide. I wondered if animals cared about burial and why humans did. I returned to the book. Furthermore, remember this. You cannot hope to defeat the demonic nature in the strongest among them if you cannot see the angelic part in the weakest. Even though it bit you, that fox was waiting for you to set it free. Always remember that. I stood up, scooped a handful of dirt, and sprinkled it over the fox. It was just a symbolic act, but a proper burial requires more than that, so I did it, and then stopped. The next page read, "Now go home, Peter." Again, that adolescent annoyance welled up in me. I want to go home too, Mom, but this walk in the woods doesn't seem to have been planned very well, does it? My voice echoed strangely. I peered through the foliage. I was standing at the edge of the woods on the left. Just beyond the trees was the dirt path that ran behind my house and Buster's. It turned out I had walked in a circle, ending up right back where I started. Annoying, but my parents were always right. I pushed through the trees and stepped onto the path, now bathed in moonlight. As I walked, I read, "No one can achieve greatness alone, son. Trust the man in black." My father's words made sense, but they also sounded a bit chilling. As I walked, I began to hear rustling. It wasn't natural. The smell of sulfur wasn't natural either. I looked to my left, towards the woods I had just exited, and there it was. The demon, grinning maniacally, burst from the trees. This one had no human form at all. It moved on clawed feet, its yellow eyes leaving glowing streaks in the air, at least 10 feet tall, with twisted, goat-like horns. It surpassed the previous two demons in sheer terror. I didn't have time to pull out the rosary or put the book down. My left hand had just grabbed the watch when its cannon-like arms slammed into my temple. I tried to open my eyes, but which way was up, which way was down? I couldn't fully regain consciousness due to the spinning, yet I couldn't pass out completely because of the noise and the heat. Who was screaming? Did it have to be so loud? Finally, I managed to prop myself up on my elbows and look around. Flames were everywhere. A circle of salt surrounded me. The fire couldn't penetrate it. Outside the salt line, there was only a sea of fire and the demon. It growled ferociously. I wasn't alone in the circle. A strange man stood between me and the demon, slightly crouched, as if ready to fight. I vaguely saw that he held an onyx rosary in his left hand. He faced the demon, yelling loudly, his voice combining with the deafening sound of the fire and the demon's roars. The demon extended its two muscular arms towards us, as if to crush us both, but seemed to hesitate. The stranger tilted his head towards me. He was dressed in black. "If I may, sir, I would greatly appreciate your assistance right now, if we wish to survive." I wanted to reply, "Of course, I just took down 2 demons today. What's more exciting than tackling a third? Just get out of the way." But all I managed to utter was a grunt, and then I passed out. Part 4. That's when I passed out. I don't know how long I was unconscious, but when I woke up, the demon was gone. I tried to sit up quickly, but my head was still spinning, making movement difficult. "Easy there, my friend. Take a deep breath. I'm afraid we have a long night ahead." At the sound of the voice, I sharply turned my head to find the speaker, letting out a small gasp when I realized he was sitting right beside me, almost invisible in the darkness of his black clothes. He sat there, arms wrapped around his knees. He was angled to keep an eye on me, but his gaze was fixed on the starry sky. "Though the demon," I stammered. "It's gone," the man in black replied concisely. I knelt, propping myself on my hands, checking myself for serious injuries. The air still reeked of sulfur and smoke. Traces of a white powder circle remained around us, but there was no sign of the raging inferno from before, let alone the sea of fire that had almost consumed us both. I felt myself, finding a wound on my temple, but it wasn't bleeding anymore. Other than that, I seemed unharmed. Suddenly panicked, I plunged my hand into my pocket. The watch was still there, intact. So was the rosary. Where's the book? I tried to recall, my head aching. The memory was hazy. I had been holding it when the demon attacked, hadn't had time to put it away. I fumbled around the grass, hoping to find traces of it. It's gone, the man in black said, a hint of sorrow in his voice. Gone? How do you know? How do you know what I was looking for? What did you do with it? As I recovered, I realized I had a million questions. It made me choose, he simply said. I waited for him to elaborate, as the answer seemed absurd, but when he said nothing further, I tried to articulate more clearly. What? Being disoriented, that was all I could manage. Finally, the man turned to me. He had short, neatly combed brown hair parted to one side. His skin was quite fair, a stark contrast to his black clothes. Your book was clearly very special. When the bull demon knocked you down, the book flew out of the fire's reach. It could have killed both of us. But then the demon noticed the book on the ground. He sighed wearily. I followed its gaze, and it suddenly smiled, creating a gap in the fire for me to step through. I understood what it was doing. It forced me to choose between you or the book, knowing that what I didn't choose, I effectively discarded. I chose to stay with you. It then closed the circle of fire, stole the book, and left. Not long after, the fire died down, and I've been here watching over you ever since. He ran a hand through his hair. Actually, I think it wanted to witness someone losing something more important than physical harm. Because, he finished, it knows physical harm only ends with death, and it didn't want to let us escape that easily. With that, he stood up, looking at the stars. The man in black spoke of the whole thing as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Who are you, anyway? He smiled. By moonlight, I could see it clearly. I'm Sebastian, he introduced simply, extending a hand. I'm Peter, I replied, a bit cautiously, shaking his hand. Were you the one who made the salt circle? Indeed, when the demon ignited the fire, I thought it was the right thing to do. I ruffled my hair in confusion. Yes, but I forgot to bring salt. You know, I didn't know why I was trying to argue. Perhaps my brain was rejecting all the present facts. I had some, he simply replied. Though I didn't doubt the sincerity of his answer, it only confused me further. You're wondering why I'm here, Sebastian remarked, not quite a question. A little more than a little, I could only answer. I might ask the same of you, he said kindly. The problem was, I felt I had every reason to question his motives, but my answer, I've been hunting demons all day, just stumbled out of the woods, while my parents are dead, would only make me sound insane. I live here, I finally managed to say. Do you? He nodded, his voice calm yet urgent. Then perhaps our questions must wait for another time. What? I asked, skeptical. You said you live here. Is that your house? He pointed behind me, over my left shoulder. I spun around and nearly collapsed at the horrifying sight. My entire house was engulfed in flames. We reached it in less than a minute. Of course, my phone was in the inferno. Do you have a phone? I yelled at Sebastian. For what? He shouted back, running beside me. I stared at him wide-eyed. To call the fire department, Professor. Do you have a phone? He shook his head calmly. This is demon fire, he explained, then stood still, trying to catch his breath. That didn't satisfy me. I didn't care what kind of fire was burning my house. I wanted it out. Have you ever been burned by demon fire? I suddenly remembered my hand, the hand that had burned like hell but bore no scratches. But the pain was like going to hell. Seeing the confusion in my eyes, he added, the ground wasn't scorched either. I looked up at the raging fire, then back at him. But what if the neighbors see it? He didn't blink. When the bull demon surrounded us with fire, did the police or fire department come? It was true, I thought. No one sees it unless they want them to, he said. I turned back to look at my house, burning, a clear kick to the groin. No one else sees this, I still yelled over the roaring flames. Where are all your neighbors? I looked around. Indeed, no one appeared. Either everyone around was completely apathetic or his words were unusually true. I frowned at Sebastian. Who are you anyway? I repeated the question for the second time that night. I'm a priest, but lately I've spent most of my time wandering the roads, he said softly, running a hand over the bridge of his nose. In the firelight, I saw it was slightly swollen and bruised. Believe me, I have a number of questions for the man I found passed out at the demon's feet, and seeing your house burn like this, you'll certainly have to explain more to me. But perhaps for now, let's put that aside. Why? I pressed, not liking that he was right. Because, Peter, if we are the only two who see this fire, it means the demons are sending a message. A chill ran down my spine. What message? I asked, not hoping for an answer. Priest Sebastian, or simply Sebastian, looked past the flickering windows to the blazing upstairs. They want us inside. Sebastian had enough salt for both of us. I think it only blocks fire, hopefully, he said, unable to stop himself. He poured salt from one cloth bag to a second, then handed me one. We'll get more salt inside if they haven't taken it. We can get other things too, as long as we're smart. My parents, they might have hidden things in the house, I suggested. He nodded readily. Do you have sunglasses or sage? My eyes widened. I don't usually carry sunglasses on impromptu night walks. Hey, I exclaimed. He smiled faintly. Be glad that question is the weirdest thing that's happened to you today. He pulled a rosary from his pocket. I noticed it was identical to mine, but perhaps that was a story for another time. Demons learn the most about us through our eyes, he said over the fire. They're more human than we want to admit. Wearing sunglasses helps prevent that, and sage won't kill them if you want to know. It's just a strong irritant, like pepper spray for monsters. Unfortunately, I don't have any sage right now. I looked at the rosary in his hand. What about the rosary? I saw it work. He hesitated before answering. That's a big question. I'd love to discuss theology at length when we have the chance. For now, understand it like this. Suppose you have $10 million. Is that power? Money is power, I nodded, glancing towards the burning front door. True, but imagine you have $10 million and there's only one other person left on Earth. That person doesn't care about money at all. All the power vanishes because it only exists in the interaction between two people. That power is something two people create and give to each other from the start. It's the same with the rosary. It can be incredibly powerful or utterly useless, depending on how you create it. Do you understand? Not exactly, I said honestly. Then you're starting to understand, he concluded. I thought of the myriad unanswered questions. Right now, I just wished I had my parents' book. What about this? I asked, pulling out the pocket watch. He looked at it curiously. I've never seen anything like it in the spiritual realm, I think it. Before I could finish, a blast of fire erupted from an upstairs window. Peter. I think something is trying to get out. We don't have much time. Sweat beaded on the back of my neck. It wants us in. He ran a hand through his hair again. They become stronger if they manage to hurt someone first, and I guess demons think we'll be their victims to gain strength. He sighed, but we have no choice. Whatever is inside there is about to break free, whether or not there are more victims. But we can stop it, right? Oh, they don't believe we can. We stood silently for a few seconds. A handful of salt scattered, flying everywhere from his open palm, creating a path through the flames into the front hall. My friend in black and I walked side by side into the fire. The flames enveloped us but couldn't touch us. Welcome to hell, I muttered. At the end of the hall, we reached the living room. Demon fire licked the walls, but the floor wasn't burning, pointing to a strange, dark shadow. It took me a few seconds to realize the presence of a little girl. She was about 6 years old, tied tightly to a chair on the other side of the room. Her wide blue eyes shone with pure terror. Her hair was tied in pigtails, trembling with fear. Her mouth was gagged too tightly to scream. Her arms, waist, and legs were wrapped in so many cords that her small feet didn't even touch the ground. Damn it, I yelled, then rushed to help her. A part of me knew very well this girl must be a decoy, and perhaps it was best to ignore her. But if I accepted abandoning a child, what righteousness did I have to hunt demons? Better to lose than to sacrifice my conscience, I suddenly understood. Perhaps I didn't know the full truth about my parents' deaths, but I still rushed towards the girl. Suddenly, I was knocked down just a few steps from the girl. Her faint whimpers made me more frantic. I struggled to turn and look at my attacker. It was Sebastian who had pushed me down. He yelled, "Back into the hall now," but I couldn't abandon the girl. Even as he pulled me to my feet, I struggled to go towards her. Sebastian changed tactics. He spun around, blocking me from the girl, his right hand still gripping my collar. The fire roared. Sebastian raised his left hand and pushed it straight into the girl's chest. In his hand was the rosary. A terrible scream shook the entire house. The girl and the chair were thrown straight back against the wall, crashing hard then rebounding. But the girl didn't touch the floor. From her body tore 6 3-meter-long limbs, shredding the chair into hundreds of pieces. Those 6 legs dug firmly into the floor, lifting the rest of her body into the air. They were like metal rods, flailing wildly, like the legs of a giant mechanical insect. But her head was still the same, pigtails and all, except now her entire body had turned blue, except for her glowing yellow eyes. And oh my God, it screamed in terror. The blue demon slammed its legs onto the floor, its metal spikes splintering the wood. I stood frozen, looking at its innocent child's face, feeling a nauseating disgust. Then the legs lowered its head, hovering directly in front of me. From that tiny head, a tongue emerged. At first glance, it looked human, except it was almost 1/2 meter long and blue. All this happened in less than 6 seconds, and I hadn't had time to react. It swept its demonic tongue across my face, deep into my cheek. The tongue was icy cold and slimy, exactly like the most rotten peach on earth. That tongue contained evil. As soon as it licked me, I couldn't control myself. I collapsed, sobbing uncontrollably, shaking all over. I didn't care about the fire raging around me. I didn't hear Sebastian desperately calling my name. I didn't care about the demon lurking. I wasn't even afraid of dying, because that cursed tongue had touched something deep inside me, and all I could do was cry and cry and cry. Part 5. I cried and cried and cried and cried. I just kept crying. Everything seemed to collapse. The loss of my parents, the secrets they had kept for so long, the dark path they had led me down, the truth that when I died, my friends and relatives would probably remember me for a while but then quickly move on, and here I was, facing this life-or-death challenge with a stranger. I wasn't ready for that. I rolled over, wearily opening my eyes. Through the smoke and tears, I vaguely saw Sebastian fighting the blue demon. He didn't seem to be gaining the upper hand. Its 6 metallic limbs danced around him like sewing needles. It evaded his rosary, but with terrifying size and speed, the final outcome seemed all too clear. Why was Sebastian fighting so fiercely? Then I understood. He was distracting it, preventing it from focusing on me. I suddenly felt the demonic weight in my mind light. The demon's mark was still deeply embedded in me. I could still feel it clearly, but at the same time, I felt it slowly fading away. The blue demon lifted one metallic leg, making Sebastian follow it with his gaze, then swiftly struck with another leg at his left side. It didn't cut him, but it was strong enough to knock him to the ground. I decided that the pressure that had just been lifted from me wasn't dissipating fast enough on its own. I struggled to my feet, tears and snot streaming down my face. The blue demon swung one leg high into the air, then brought it down like a rocket, its sharp point aimed straight at Sebastian's chest. He didn't even have time to dodge. I had never delved deeply into my parents' deaths. The official announcement was carbon monoxide poisoning, I think, and after the house was checked and confirmed safe, I didn't care to investigate further. There was nothing worth looking into. All of us live with a sense of immortality. We know we'll die, just as we know the sun is 93 million miles from Earth and will swallow the planet in 5 billion years. We accept it, but not truly, not completely. When my parents died, for the first time, I deeply understood that I too would die. And you, have you accepted that? Truly have you? I thought I had, but it turned out I was wrong. Sebastian couldn't move in time, nor could the demon. Time was against it, or rather, time wasn't working for it. The leg poised to strike remained motionless, the demon's entire body frozen, only its yellow eyes moving. They darted around the girl's blue face, past the terrible tongue hanging suspended. Sebastian gasped, looking from the leg to the demon, then to me. Then he deftly slipped out from under the spike, the gap barely 2 finger widths. His black shirt was torn as he escaped. I stood there, chest heaving in the fiery living room, my left hand clutching the pocket watch, its knob pulled out. The demon was frozen. Sebastian stared up, mouth agape. You, who are you? I'm a demon hunter, like my parents were. Now get out of the way. The demon couldn't move as I stood directly beneath it, one leg still suspended, ready to strike. I braced myself in the center of the 5-pointed star formed by its other 5 legs. I pulled out the rosary, looked up at the demon, my mind filled with rage and pain. I leapt high, slamming my rosary-wrapped fist into its throat. Its grotesque body, all 6 metallic legs, flew up, hitting the ceiling, then crashed to the floor. My scream was swallowed by the roaring fire. I lunged forward, beginning my assault. I ripped off each leg one by one from its trembling body. I punched, I slammed, I screamed, I cried, I cursed, I tore the monster apart. Everything became a blur. When all its legs were torn off, I picked them up, trying to break the metal which cut into my hands. I yelped, dropped them, and then they cut my leg. I cursed, picked them up again, cut my hands again, dropped them again. I cried. Something was wrong with my arm, my skin was changing color. Slowly, I understood. Demon blood was like acid, and wherever it touched, it caused excruciating pain. This made me furious. I was insane. I wanted to gouge out its eyes, even if the demon blood ate my hands down to bare bone. I just wanted it to suffer agonizing pain. An arm wrapped around me from behind, pulling me back. "Peter, stop, it's killing you." I almost laughed. "I'm the one killing it, can't you see?" I struggled. "Peter, stop, that's how it defeats you. Look at yourself." I looked down at my arms, my legs, all torn and bloody. It was quite possible my arteries were about to be punctured. He spun me around, gripping my shoulders firmly, looking straight into my eyes. "Look at me, Peter. The things that hurt us, the sorrows that cause us pain, we can stop them from causing further harm, but they don't just disappear on their own. Even if we heal them, they still exist somewhere. We cannot erase their presence. I have spent my entire life trying to resist that truth." I looked back at the broken form of the demon. All its limbs were gone. Its blue face was no longer human, but I swore I saw it smile. It looked directly at me and smiled. "Peter," Sebastian sighed softly, "please let this demon go." I collapsed into his shoulder, crying again. Without rest or proper bandaging, I walked into the adjacent dining room. The table was still set with knives and forks. Thankfully, no demons appeared. Sebastian suggested he go on alone, which in essence meant he was willing to sacrifice his life in my place. I refused. "Peter, you need to recover. You said your parents might have hidden useful objects in the house. That's important. Do you know where they hid them?" I shook my head dejectedly, my mind clouded, but honestly, I didn't know. Now that I thought about it, I regretted mentioning it. "Try to think, Peter. It's possible they hid something you don't know about, a secret room." I scoffed bitterly. "Hiding? Oh yes, they clearly hid a lot of big things. If there's something that could help us, they probably hid that too." All my memories were becoming wounds. I missed them, but at the same time, I resented them. And clearly, they were entirely capable of hiding something as important as a room. "Oh, damn it," I blurted out. I glanced around the walls, looked up at the ceiling, then turned back to the spare bedroom upstairs. It faced both the front and back yards. Sebastian looked at me blankly. "This house isn't designed like that. It can't have windows facing both directions." His face showed a dawning realization. "Have you ever looked out both of those windows?" I spun towards the stairs. I only looked out the back. Now that I think about it, my parents, I swallowed hard. "Never opened that curtain on the front wall. And you never once asked," Sebastian said as we walked up the stairs. It seemed I used to be a rather carefree child. I grabbed a butcher knife from the knives and forks laid out on the table, just in case I needed to pry open a window. Who knew? My parents had spiritually locked me away. Perhaps they had taken physical precautions too. I suddenly realized that, despite the excruciating pain, the wounds from the blue demon weren't preventing me from moving forward. Perhaps that was part of its plan too. We went up the fiery stairs into the first room on the right without incident. I rushed towards the tiny curtain at the end of the room. The curtain was still pitch black. I gripped both edges of the curtain, suddenly realizing I didn't know what I wanted to see. An answer meant evidence. Finding the truth meant uncovering deceit. I yanked the curtain open, grabbing the windowsill, and looked into the window. It didn't look outside. This was the only room not on fire. I fumbled for a light switch. The light illuminated the entire space, which looked like a workshop, and it had been ransacked. I ran around, my head spinning. No, 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 who was here? I picked up the remnants, empty, torn bags labeled salt and sage, ripped pages from an old book, mysterious equipment that would make sense to my mother, a physicist. All lies, nothing useful for me. Plenty of loss, nothing helpful. Exactly the kind of blow I didn't need right now. On the wall opposite, I saw something and rushed towards it. 2 empty brackets were firmly mounted on the wall. Below them was a small museum-style plaque for notes, labeling the piece. The very edge of the blessed sword. Damn it, I looked at Sebastian. There should have been a sword right here. We could have used it. I punched the wall, grabbing a piece of machinery and throwing it across the room. Damn it all, damn it! I knelt, tears welling up again. Suddenly, an idea struck me. Sebastian, I jumped up. Oh, my dear Sebastian, look what we have here. I held up the butcher knife I had brought from downstairs. He eyed me skeptically but didn't back away. You're a priest, I almost laughed. He remained impassive. You can bless this knife. We'll make our own demon-slaying sword. No one can stop us. Peter, don't refuse. It'll be perfect, huh? Now we'll have the upper hand. Peter, I can't do that. I felt my face fall. Why, my friend? He sighed, because it's a weapon. Exactly, I stepped forward, tapping the tip of the knife with my finger. That's the purpose. Listen, Peter, your wounds aren't too deep. Find some bandages, then we'll continue. I slammed the knife down on the workbench. That doesn't matter right now, Sebastian. You bless the knife, we end this. Do it. He looked at me completely still, as if he hadn't heard me. Peter, what does a blessing mean? It's the giving of a soul with the faith and goodwill of the giver. I'm sorry, I cannot bless something made to cause harm to others. This is more than a matter of life and death, which is unavoidable. It concerns faith, the soul. And this room isn't on fire, is it? That's right, I said, but I began to see flashing red streaks at the edge of my vision, curling like a grotesque smile. Get out of here. I felt the heat of the fire growing more intense. I won't leave you, Peter. That's a serious promise. You've already left me, now get out of my house. My limbs felt as strong as tree trunks now. I felt like they could cause pain. Peter, that's the demon's mark. It's taking over you, you have to fight it. Have you ever considered that this is my own choice? That I want you to leave so I can take care of this myself? I told him to get out. I lunged, determined to make him leave me. I didn't want to be ignored any longer. I slammed into Sebastian, knocking the breath out of him, then lifted him off the floor. I ran to the window opening into the empty room, held him tight, and launched myself through. We landed with a thud that stunned even me. We lay there, gasping for air. Peter, he wheezed, listen to me. He coughed, choking. The only way through it, he gasped, you have to let go. He struggled to sit up. Don't fight it, he urged. That's the only way, remember. He still couldn't stand. I helped him up. I recovered faster, so I carried him, guiding him out of the room towards the top of the stairs, where the fire raged. I'm going to banish this demon. Peter, please, he yelled, his coughing subsiding. You have to let go to escape it. Ready? I replied, tears streaming down my face. I pushed him forward, letting him tumble head over heels down the fiery stairs. Demon, I release you. Part 6. The demon was released. In my heart, I justified pushing Sebastian down the stairs. A part of me knew immediately I had done something wrong, but on the other hand, I felt a strange satisfaction in that realization. A vague thought flickered through my mind about how I used to find the doctrine of the Trinity ridiculous. A part of me still did, but I also understood that no thought of mine could exist without the others coexisting. Tears welled in my eyes, but my lips curled into a smile. My mind was reeling. I was both excited and terrified for the next step. I turned back to look down the upstairs hallway, my childhood home in red flames. Everything looked different, but something was calling to me, something I still lacked. A thought suddenly sparked, making me gasp. I knew what I had to do next. I completely pushed Sebastian out of my mind. You pushed him, you bastard. I grabbed the butcher knife from the room, tucked it into my waistband, and proceeded down the hall. With each step, I swore tiny flames rose from my footprints. As I rounded the corner, I found I was not alone. A gasp caught in my throat, then my lips curled. You're back, I whispered. The bull demon, its horns scraping the ceiling, stood there. Its arms, as thick as pillars, nearly swept the floor. Flames licked around its fingertips. Its long snout placed its face somewhere between human and bovine, while its entire eyes glowed yellow. A feeling of hateful rage and fear rose in my throat. It smiled. Damn, the sight was grotesque, making the skin on its snout wrinkle. It raised a long finger, its sharp nail pointing at the ceiling. My parents' book was hanging by a string. I understood immediately. It was an alluring bait. It wanted me dead. While my eyes still greedily looked at the book, I wondered how the demon intended to act. It charged at me, and I charged at it. I was arrogant. I used that arrogance, also knowing that arrogance would weaken me, and I feared that. The bull demon raised its hand and swung it straight at my skull. In one swift motion, I pulled the watch from my left pocket and the rosary from my right. I swung the rosary up, my hand still gripping it tightly, and at the same time flicked the watch knob with my right finger. The demon's arm froze in midair. Then I threw the rosary, cleanly catching its massive hand. Damn, what a perfect move. My momentum carried me past it, the rosary cord taut, easily pulling the demon off its feet. I dropped to one knee, throwing the monster over my head, even though it must have weighed half a ton, and it crashed to the floor. It whimpered. I realized that, unlike the previous ones, this demon didn't rely on conveying emotions through contact. Perhaps it only used physical strength to intimidate its victims, not supernatural connection to pressure the mind. All threats were based on the human mind, trapping people into setting their own snares, perhaps the greatest magic. Now it lay still at my feet. I felt incredibly powerful. I wrapped the rosary around its neck, pulled it off the floor, and squeezed tightly. Sebastian had said the rosary was only powerful if you let it interact correctly. Now I figured he was talking nonsense. I was clearly feeling the power flow into my hand as I choked the demon. Then it began to shrink. Each time I gritted my teeth and tensed my muscles, it contracted more. Controlled by the watch, all it could do was whimper. Eventually, the monster shrunk to the size of a child, its horns tiny stumps. I pulled out the watch, pushed the knob back in, and watched its two legs flail. I smiled. A demon meets a demon hunter, huh? Witnessing its struggles was truly exhilarating. I clearly felt the power from its muscles, sinews, bones as hard as steel transferring into me. Perhaps I didn't even need the rosary. I yanked the butcher knife from my waistband, wanting it to see. Its eyes widened. It understood. I smiled as wide as I could, waiting. I looked up. The book was still hovering directly above me. A quote flashed back to mind. You cannot hope to defeat the angelic nature in the greatest of beings if you are unable to see the demonic nature in the least of them. Wait, that sounds wrong. I think I mixed up the quote. I looked at the tiny demon, confused. I began to tremble. I understood immediately. Killing this demon would also be the end of me. I didn't know how, but I knew I had to let go of the knife. I dropped it to the floor. Still angry, I hurled the tiny bull demon towards the wall like Tom Brady throwing a football. The little bastard hit the wall with a thud, then rolled to the ground. It scrambled up, making a chirping sound like some demonic Pikachu, then scurried away around the corner, its legs too short to bend. I shook my head. The trophy still dangled above. I jumped 2-3 times before snatching it from the string. I opened the book in the firelight, eager to know how proud my parents were. Remember, we are often weakest in our strongest moments. I slammed the book shut in a rage. Didn't my parents know how much effort I'd put into this victory? I decided to close the book. If their advice only made things worse, there was no need to listen. I wondered if their adherence to those philosophies had led them to their deaths, and I felt a surge of pride in believing I wasn't that foolish. I turned towards the end of the hallway with supreme confidence. The bull demon's power still coursed through me. I clearly felt it, a wonderful sensation to believe everyone else was weak. I liked it. A part of me liked it. A small voice warned that I was wrong. I dismissed that voice, thinking it weak. I picked up the knife again. I knew for sure, I knew I was stronger than whatever I was about to face. My next enemy should be terrified that nothing could scare me. I rounded the final bend and screamed. How many chins can one person have? Suppose 7 times that number. Imagine countless chins spilling down, covering the chest, merging with sagging breasts. Imagine a creature so fat there was no room for legs. 2 short arms plunged into the massive bulk of flesh, unable to reach the shoulders, only sinking into thick, leathery skin. Think of a tarantula leg, magnified 30 times, now covered in human skin, but still retaining its bristly hairs. That's how bizarre it was to see one foot pointing backwards, attached to a sea of skin instead of a calf, as if from experience. Flabby octopus tentacles with suction cups that shouldn't exist on something that crawls on land. Plus a scorpion tail over 2 meters long growing from its back, also covered in human skin, writhing like a cat's tail, and the incomprehensible purpose of a proboscis-like sucky tube under its armpit, which was covered in excess fat. All those horrible things combined into the massive creature blocking the doorway of my tiny spare bedroom. It met my gaze and smiled. I didn't want to deal with this monstrosity. I pulled out the watch. Its grotesque, bulging eyes immediately gleamed with pleasure. All its tentacles quivered excitedly, emitting rustling, clacking, rattling, and a slightly strange, distant buzzing sound. The thing slithered forward, obscuring the doorway, its body too massive. I tucked the book into my waistband, then pulled the watch knob. It froze, and I realized I had a problem. The disgusting thing jammed the doorway. Even if I wanted to climb over, I would never touch that thing. There was no space to squeeze through. I pushed the watch knob back in. The demon moved, retreating a tiny bit, but not enough. It was still smiling. I tried 13 more times and realized I was losing while it hadn't even had to move. There was no other way around. This was the only entrance to the room. The window inside could only be opened from that side, and it was on the second floor, a sheer drop. The secret room on the other side had concrete walls. There seemed to be no other way. To enter, I had to get past this fat bastard. Each time I used the watch to freeze it, it spread its body to block the doorway. When I released it, it only backed up a tiny bit. No effect. I chose a different tactic. Gripping the rosary, trying to suppress my nausea, I advanced. My muscles surged, my bones hard as iron, ready for battle. I was stronger, clearly. I swung a punch, my fist landing with a squishy sound on its slimy skin. When I pulled my hand back, I saw the skin where the rosary touched was shriveled, seemingly burned, but I quickly lost its trace in the sea of flesh. The counterattack hit me by surprise. One of its puffy, fat arms swung powerfully, knocking me to the ground. I stifled a gasp, anger blazing. I picked up the knife and plunged it deep into the mass of flesh. A little acidic blood oozed out but disappeared into the skin when I withdrew the knife. I didn't see the scorpion tail swing down and sting my shoulder. Damn, it hurt. It retracted quickly enough to knock me down and leave a stinging wound. I still got up, trying to ignore the pain. I had to hit harder. No other way. Gripping the rosary, I charged and threw my entire body onto its flesh. It felt like roasted chicken skin covering a mixture of rotten plums and liquid feces. I tried to lift my head, but my hands sank deep, like foam rubber, unable to prop myself up. The creature slowly used a skinny, human-like spider leg to stroke the back of my neck, gently, as if playing a violin. It took me a long time to swim out of the flesh and roll back to the floor, gasping for air. I would not try that again. On a table near the wall was a vase. I grabbed it and smashed it against the monster. An octopus tentacle whipped my head with equal force. I grabbed a piece of its fat, intending to pull it towards the fire in the hallway, hoping the demon fire would hurt it, but before I could finish, it sprayed blood from the wound, splattering my hand. The acid burned my skin. I screamed in a rage. I punched, I stabbed, and each blow was met with a counter. Each knife thrust resulted in the scorpion tail stinging me once. Its blows weren't too strong, the stings not too deep. It wanted to prolong the game, not knock me out immediately. This loop could be endless. Between one blow and the next, I knelt to the floor, bursting into tears. There was no escape, no way. While I was immersed in pain, the monster remained nonchalant. Maybe it would end me right now, but I didn't care. The same emotions that had just turned me arrogant now strangled me in a mess of self-doubt. I felt worthless. The tentacles wrapped around me. I let them. They pulled me towards the fat creature. I didn't resist. Disgusting flesh and skin brushed against my fingers. I climbed over it. I gave up, letting the demon's arms push me forward. They skillfully but firmly guided me towards its head, and I surrendered, accepting because it was so much easier that way. Just let them. Its tongue licked my hand, slimy, leaving thick drool. Inside, hidden hands pushed further, seating me on its mountainous chins. I grabbed a few folds of chin to hold on and climb, and somehow I slipped past its left arm, over its left shoulder, and fell onto its fatty back into the space beyond. I had crossed the demon. I was in my room. I sat there, dumbfounded, legs spread, blinking rapidly. Its back fat still spilled into the room, quivering like real flesh, but the demon didn't turn to look at me. No particular reaction. Then another person rolled onto the floor beside me, gasping for breath. My mouth hung open. Sebastian propped himself up on his hands and knees, breathing heavily. My mind reeled. I shouted what I thought was most important. "Hi." Sebastian, still breathing silently, stood up. He extended a hand and pulled me to my feet. I looked into his eyes, then bowed my head. I'm not angry at you anymore, Sebastian. I thought you. I looked up. What were you waiting for? I saw you fall, he blinked. Did you think I was dead? My silence answered for me. Peter, you pushed me down the stairs, not into an abyss. You're right, and besides, this is your house. You know there's a landing mid-stair. I only tumbled 8 steps, so did it hurt much? I asked foolishly. Yes, it did. I slammed my shin against the table below the landing. He sighed, then smiled. But over the years, I've learned how to fall safely. I tried to process everything, but the fire, the stairs, Peter, we've been living with that fire all along. It's mostly for show. It doesn't spread. We're fine as long as we don't directly touch it. If we're careful, we can put it out with salt. I tried to understand one more thing. So why didn't you come help me sooner? He raised an eyebrow. You mean when you were in a rage and seemingly trying to kill me, right? Clearly, he was emphasizing every punctuation mark. Sebastian, I didn't mean to kill you, Then my voice trailed off, fumbling with my emotions. I realized 2 things at once. First, I didn't know why I had been so aggressive with Sebastian. Second, whatever had been controlling me was still partly there. I was stunned. I'm sorry, I said, trembling. He placed one hand on my biceps, the other on my opposite shoulder. He looked straight into my eyes. Peter, I forgive you. Part of me wanted to cry, part of me wanted to continue our previous fight. Why? I asked. He released my shoulders. In St. Francis's prayer, it says, "It is in pardoning that we are pardoned." My soul depends on that truth, he sighed. All other souls do too, don't they? I didn't know how to answer. I don't think you realized how much the blue demon affected you, he continued. I turned away, hating to admit he was right, hating to feel out of control. I hated suddenly remembering. How did you get us past that demon? He was silent for a moment, then said, "It caught you in a trap." I looked at him blankly. I followed you after you pushed me down the stairs. I winced at the recollection. On the other hand, there was a touch of self-satisfaction. I saw you take down the bull demon and watched it flee. It flew right past me, I tell you. Did you feel stronger after shrinking it, like you absorbed its power? I didn't speak, but my face must have revealed the answer. He continued, anyone who set up that demon knew you would defeat it easily. They knew the feeling you'd have after crushing it. They knew you'd bring that fighting spirit to the next challenge. I turned to look at the wall of flesh blocking the way. It gurgled something that sounded like boiling water. I don't know how to defeat it, I said. Sebastian looked up at the ceiling. Do you remember what I told you about the rosary when you said you didn't quite understand? I said you were starting to understand. The problem is, you're too focused on trying to defeat it, forgetting about not causing harm. His words only confused me further. Sebastian. He took a deep breath. I assume that demon is the embodiment of retribution. Does it often hit you? Constantly, I snapped, secretly counting how much of my body was already bruised. But I observed, Peter, that there were times you sat there crying, wailing, and it didn't move. It only struck when you struck, and it used the same type of tactics with proportional intensity to retaliate. My mouth hung open, but no words came out. It even knew how to react to the watch. You froze it, it froze you. Every action was met with an equal response. I didn't like how precisely he was speaking. So, how do we get past it then? His expression was unreadable. I anticipated this game. Do you remember what I tried to tell you before you pushed me down the stairs? A rush of shame, anger, and pride surged. Not really, I said. The only way is to let go. Don't resist it. It sounded familiar, painfully so. So we just ignore it and it leaves us alone, I sighed. I thought you were trying to protect yourself when you said that. He shrugged. I promised I wouldn't leave you. We were silent for a few seconds, then I spoke. So that was the trap. They wanted me to defeat the bull demon, bringing that aggression with me to meet the retribution demon. He nodded slowly. Fighting demons is hard when the fight itself is the demon. I wanted to burst into tears. So, another subject, he changed the topic. Is there anything in your room important enough for them to guard so fiercely? I smiled faintly. At least I still did one thing right. I know my next step. I draped my arm over his shoulder. Sebastian, my friend, it seems we're nearing the end of the journey. Welcome to my childhood bedroom. Unfortunately, under my bed, there really is a monster. Part 7. Sebastian, my friend, I think we're nearing the end of the journey. Welcome to my tiny room. It turns out there really is a monster under my bed. Damn it. He looked at me with skepticism. I released my arm from his shoulder and walked confidently towards my childhood bed. I grabbed the foot of the bed and pulled hard, swinging the entire bed into the middle of the room. Sebastian quickly backed away. Under the bed was a door, or perhaps more accurately, a trapdoor. It was a square hatch made of the same wood as the floor. If it had remained covered by the bed, I'm sure I would never have discovered it. But now it was exposed, and knowing what I was looking for, I saw it clearly. I knelt, gently tracing the edges of the door. There were carvings. I leaned closer to read a series of numbers and a few words carved into the wood. 10-11-987 Gore 1913. I didn't understand what it meant, but I recognized the erratic handwriting as very similar to my father's. Recalling where I had first touched the handle the other day, though it felt like a lifetime ago, I ran my hand around the wooden rim, searching for a firm spot to open the hatch. Peter, Sebastian said, his voice weak with warning. Are you sure you want to do this? Are you ready for what awaits behind it? His words still conjured a mess of emotions I didn't invite. Annoyance, shame, longing, and anger. Definitely anger. I turned to him, looking equally weary. Sebastian, do you know why I didn't kill the bull demon in the hallway? He looked on in silence, patiently waiting. I sighed. My father told me that I couldn't kill a demon if there was still another demon living inside me, that no weapon would be effective. I clenched and then unclenched my hand from the trapdoor handle, my eyes fixed on the floor. I wouldn't be able to kill that bull demon. My instinct tells me that if I tried, the cost would be truly horrific. I looked up at him. I still have 2 demons in my heart. He received my words in silence. After a moment, he spoke, choosing his words carefully. If you open this door, Peter, there will be no turning back. For better or worse, everything that happens will be irreversible. That's why I have to keep going, I replied, equally solemn. I lowered my head, looking at the trapdoor again. I suddenly realized that no matter what lay on the other side, my life would certainly not be the same after I opened it. There would always be a before and an after. And then I thought, no one builds statues for those who live contentedly. Very few statues depict a guy lounging on a couch, eating chips and scratching his crotch. I flung the door open. A blast of heat aggressively struck my face, making me recoil. I looked up at Sebastian. He clearly looked terrified. I lowered the trapdoor to the floor and stood up, a faint, sad smile on my lips. Welcome to hell. Below was a ladder roughly carved into the rock face. How there was a rock wall directly under my second-floor bedroom, or why it only allowed a 3-foot-wide opening to climb down, I didn't know. Who carved the ladder? Why did those crooked, uneven steps look so disturbingly odd? Where was the heat emanating from? But today had been full of enough strangeness, so I ignored them. We climbed down at least 30 feet, perhaps 100. It turned out hell was much closer than we thought, closer than we imagined and perhaps created by us. I stepped off the last rung of the ladder, Sebastian following. We were in a room. Actually, a cave, but clearly used by someone, though no one was currently visible. On the ground were several small fires. I had a feeling they weren't ordinary fires and would be easily extinguished by salt. The faint light was just enough for me to see that this room was like an antechamber. A string of small fires led into a larger chamber directly ahead. Sebastian and I looked at each other, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. Sweat on his forehead glistened like shattered glass. The rest of his face was in shadow. Peter, be ready for what's to come. Get out your rosary, he instructed. I complied, checked my salt pouch still half full, then took out the watch, knowing I'd need it soon. I fumbled for the book. Hold this watch for me, Sebastian. You know how special it is. It will be useful. He took it very seriously. I held out the book, open with both hands, towards the firelight. I don't think we can get through the next hurdle without the watch. My parents clearly knew about this door. They understood more than they said, even more than they should have said. Now I need their words. They owe me that. It was almost impossible to read in the dim light, so I edged towards the fires in the wider chamber. "Careful, Peter," Sebastian warned. "I think someone knows we're coming." "Don't worry, I just need to read." A sudden rumble echoed, almost knocking me over. I stumbled, turning to see what had happened. A large metal door had slammed shut, blocking the antechamber and trapping Sebastian on the other side. I rushed to it, slamming my hands on the surface, calling his name. I could feel the thickness of the metal. With just a few palm strikes, I understood immediately that even with all my strength, it would be futile. Finally, I stopped, exhausted, pressing my forehead against the door. I didn't know how to escape, and though I didn't know what was in this room, I was sure I couldn't face it alone. I just wanted to cry. I wanted my father and mother. Then I heard a man's voice. "Hello, Peter." The voice was smooth, like a serpent's. "I've been waiting for you for many years." I turned to see someone I'd never known, yet somehow I immediately understood two things. This wasn't our first encounter, and he intended to harm me. He looked very old, almost ancient, but not weak. His white hair was slicked back, his white goatee curled under his chin. He wore a garish, ugly yellow robe. He stood regally, with several small fires on the ground flanking him, as if perfectly arranged. He was clearly very pleased. I started breathing heavily. The air, already hot as fire, was now suffocating, like a thick blanket pressing down. Who are you?" I quickly tucked the book back into my waistband, hiding the rosary in my pocket. He grinned broadly. "Guess, Peter." Just hearing him say my name sent a chill down my spine. It felt so wrong that he knew me. A name flashed into my mind. "You're Goran?" I asked tentatively. "Very good, Peter." He laughed loudly, a forked tongue flickering. I braced myself, unsure what he would do. I wished Sebastian were here, but my heart, sadly, remembered the watch more. My pulse raced. "Damn it, it's hot. What are you anyway?" I tried to sound tough. "You know what I am, Peter." His eyes glowed yellow. "But the other demons, they serve me, Peter. I am an ancient one. Everything that happens is by my will." He concluded coldly, his voice echoing menacingly throughout the room. I slowly understood. If I wanted to get back to that door, I had to uncover the truth. What the hell was going on? In retrospect, crawling through the trapdoor had been a stupid idea. "So why do you need me here?" I pressed. He took several long, agile steps towards me. "Because you closed the door." The strong smell of sulfur emanated from him, but what caught my attention more was on his neck, just above the collar of his robe. A bruise, like the mark of 5 tight fingers. I gasped in horror. You're the one I pushed back into hell," I whispered. He glared, "And I have waited a very long time for you to rejoin me here." I pressed my back against the cold, stony wall. Everything was wrong. I shuddered, realizing the irreversible mistake of stepping through this door. You said I closed the door." A malicious smile spread across Goran's face, a hint of pleasure from the destruction of all hope around it. "That's right, Peter, but now you've opened it again." He glanced at the sealed metal door. "You see. Those minor demons can slip through like grains of sand through a loosely cupped hand, but for me to find a way back is incredibly difficult. This house," he turned back to me, his eyes sharp. "Music." I gasped, losing control. What have my parents done? How long did you think I would be surprised when I finally broke through, only to be confronted with the sight of myself frozen mid-action? At first, I thought I was about to face a formidable opponent. My mind spun. How much did he know? How well did he know my parents, understand me? Did I have any ace up my sleeve? "But I was mistaken," Goran continued, his eyes blazing, forked tongue flicking. "I was facing someone with no special talent." My stomach clenched. He wanted to scare me, and he was clearly succeeding. "I quickly saw you had no ability. You stood there like an ant on a giant's shoulder." The stifling, terrible heat, the suffocating smell of sulfur did not help my heart rate, which demanded more oxygen. I confronted you. I pushed you back," I mumbled, as if talking to myself. "While you were wetting your pants and crying from a burned hand, Peter," Goran spat. "Clearly, you were merely following someone else's lead. No, I knew pushing me away was only temporary." His voice dropped, smooth and menacing. "I knew you would receive my message and return." I sank to the floor. So this whole journey was meant to bring me here, to open the door again. He rolled his yellow eyes. Indeed, Peter, well done. And now the door has been opened by the fool who once closed it. I can pass through freely whenever I wish. I struggled to control my breathing. But the demons I faced, both inside and out, they were real. No one can take them from me. Goran knew that too. He was invading my mind and I was letting him. I had to stop. I had to think. Sebastian said. He burst out laughing. I have observed him for a long time. You must realize his greatest weakness is his blind faith. Do you regret your decision to rely on faith to enter this house and open the door? I started looking around, searching for anything plausible. There had to be a way out, or at least a chance for me to prove I had tried before I died. Perhaps I'd have to be content with that. My father's words echoed in my mind. Never forget, he warned you that any battle worth fighting is one you risk losing. I desperately scanned the four walls, the fires weighing down like stones. Then I saw it. In the flames, I turned to Goran. Your subordinate demons, can they move freely back and forth after entering my house and still come back here? He took 5 steps closer, his voice lowered, like two friends sharing a secret. Peter, if you want to distract me to sneak and grab something from the fire, this is a terrible attempt. Come here. In my daze, I didn't know what to do but follow. My hand still gripped the rosary in my pocket, an instinct telling me not to reveal it too soon, lest I regret it. And don't even think about using the rosary on me, Peter, he snapped, turning his head, his face serious. Trust me, I know its effectiveness. The bruise of 5 fingers was clear on his neck, prominent in the firelight. And that is your weakness. I understand everything you can use. Do you understand anything about me? He stopped, smiling faintly, beside a pile of fire. Amidst the circle of flames, leaning against a stone pillar on a small, clear patch of floor, lay a sword. I immediately recognized it. It perfectly matched the empty brackets in my parents' secret room. Blessed by 2 popes, Peter, Goran gloated. Surely enough to kill any demon, take it. My mind raced through options. Half a pouch of salt was enough to make a protective circle, but not enough to encompass such a wide fire. Or should I just risk it, dash through the fire, grab the sword, and hope to ambush him? Could I survive more than a few seconds? Peter, his voice was patronizing as he addressed me still kneeling. Stop racking your brain, just steal the sword. He turned and walked to the center of the room. In fact, he said, looking back and smiling, I'll give it to you for free. He waved his hand lightly. The fires immediately extinguished. I stood dumbfounded. It must be a trap. The moment I touched the sword, he would roast me, right? But what other choice did I have? If I had to die, at least I wanted to die standing on my own 2 feet, as a starter. Honestly, it was still the brightest option among the terrible ones. My eyes swam as I strode across the stone floor that had been blazing just seconds before. I reached the sword, gently extended my hand, took a deep breath. I picked it up. Nothing happened. The sword felt heavy in my hand. From the center of the room, Goran spoke. Bring it here, Peter. I could hear the sinister smile in his voice, even though my eyes were on the sword. I have something I want to show you. I looked up, cautiously taking a few steps. He waved his hand towards the dark end of the room, his garish yellow robe flapping. Someone wants to meet you, Peter. A shadow, then a second shadow, emerged from the darkness. I know you still have a few demons to exorcise, he continued, his voice growing softer but more resonant, as if the room had suddenly fallen silent, and no one leaves here until that battle is over. Someone will never leave. Waves of nausea washed over me. My legs trembled, then buckled. The 2 figures remained obscured in the darkness, only a few flickers of fire licking around their footsteps. Were their eyes glowing yellow? I wasn't sure. Come on, Peter, Goran encouraged idly, addressing me, still kneeling. You really should stand up to meet them. And then, emerging from the darkness, their faces unreadable, were the 2 figures of my parents. Part 8. Stand up, Peter, Goran said with a mocking encouragement as he saw me kneeling. You really should rise to face them. Right in front of me, slowly emerging from the darkness, their faces unreadable, were the figures of my parents. They walked closer, each step deliberate, then separated. My mother circled to the left, my father went to the right. They were sandwiching me. Their expressions showed neither joy nor sorrow. My breathing became shallow. No, you too. This isn't real. I started gasping. Memories of the last time I saw them, silent and unmoving, suddenly flooded back. That day, their faces had been as expressionless as now. I panicked. This isn't my real parents. It's not. I thrust the sword towards my mother, then swung it towards my father, trying to back away to avoid both at once. I know what I saw when I went to Buster Duncan's house. It wasn't him, it was just an illusion. I turned to point the sword at Goran, but I knew I couldn't intimidate him while still having to retreat from where he stood. I saw him smile. It's all just the demons I still carry inside. I screamed at Goran, the tip of my sword trembling. He spread his hands in a fake shrug. If you're so confident, Peter, then put your words into action. My parents were now equidistant on either side, 180 degrees apart. They were about 6 or 7 feet from me, standing still for a moment, then began to close in. Peter, Goran's voice echoed through the cavernous room. Why are you so afraid of the demons that still guide your life? I quickly changed position, not letting myself be caught between my parents again. They just subtly turned, patiently following, repositioning their encirclement. They just kept looking at me with patience. Perhaps this is the first time we've met, Peter, Goran's voice boomed through the 4 walls, as if the very rock itself was speaking. But you've faced me countless times throughout your life. In the world above, I only exist as a phenomenon, an action. Like particles and waves, they can appear alternately but cannot be both at the same time. But now, it's time for everything to change. It's time for you to open that door. I ran past a pile of fire on the ground, but immediately realized it was a terrible idea as my mother circled one way and my father circled the other. In the world above, people learn to live with myriad demons in their lives, but they are utterly terrified when they see my true form. No one fears the devil by name, Peter. What makes them scream in terror is realizing he has resided in their hearts all along. I sprinted through the flames before my parents could close in, landing awkwardly, dropping the sword. Even though I avoided the fire, the heat still blasted me as I flew past. You have met me many times, Peter. Then you accepted me. I propped myself up, trying to stand, my chest heaving. Do you remember the accident at the end of high school? I held my breath. His sinister smile widened. The car crash, 4 students, 4 families. Your friend Ryan, the one who took you out that night, was among them. My blood ran cold, even in that hot place. I caused that, he said. I snatched the sword. My parents still maintained their distance, a few steps away. Everyone blamed everything. Themselves, each other, the victims, those present, those absent. But in the end, it was all meaningless coincidence, and accepting that there was no reason was the hardest thing. Finally, they were forced to nod to move on. They accepted that there was no explanation, Peter. I am the terrible thing that happens for no reason. Tears streamed down my face. The loss of Ryan right before graduation had changed me forever, marking a painful kind of maturity. But it made you live more responsibly, Goran continued. From then on, you always drove carefully, remembering clearly the sight of Ryan's head flying nearly 20 meters from the car. That's how you matured, you see, Peter? I was a part of you. I gripped the sword hilt, my knuckles white, then began to charge towards Goran. The thought of tormenting him consumed my mind. There was no room for anything else. He spread his hands as if to embrace me. Yes, Peter, yes. I stopped. I couldn't. Absolutely couldn't kill any demon when another demon still lived within me. I looked back at my parents. They were on one side, Goran on the other, encircling me. Their faces were still blank. I turned back towards them. That is inevitable, Peter, Goran said slowly behind me. Until now, I have only existed out there as an action, an event, like particles and waves can appear alternately but not simultaneously. But now, it's time for everything to change. It's time for you to open that door. I looked back at the entrance, still blocked by the metal door. He was right. This was the unavoidable end. Suddenly, an idea struck me. If those entities weren't my parents, then perhaps my real parents were trying to communicate with me. Could they hear me? Even in this place called hell? I quickly pulled out the book and read as fast as I could. If you are fighting an opponent who is stronger and better armed, Peter, be wise. Do not confront directly. You cannot overcome, so humble yourself. Before I could finish reading, my father or the demon disguised as my father snatched the book from my hand and threw it to the floor. My mother grabbed my arm. A cold shiver ran down my bicep, penetrating my chest. In that instant, a flash of realization struck me. I had never truly accepted my parents' deaths, and there were countless things about their lives I had never confronted. This moment was unavoidable. I yanked my arm free easily. My father grabbed my shoulder. Another icy chill poured down my back, then up my neck. Inside me, I felt like I was melting into a thick liquid. I struggled free from my father's grip, then ran in a circle between them, avoiding Goran. My feet felt like they were stuck in cement. I only managed a few steps. Even though it bit you, that fox was waiting for you. Remember that. I turned back to face both of them. Physical liberation and spiritual liberation are often intertwined. I stood firm, though my legs trembled as if about to collapse. Nausea twisted my stomach like a stormy sea. I shuddered, then spoke. Whatever you two are, stop waiting. I noticed Goran looking at me curiously. Mom, Dad, you two hurt me. I took a deep, trembling breath. When you were alive, we never talked enough, as we should have. I always held back, and you two held back your secrets. Your secrets destroyed your lives, and they could very well destroy mine. We always kept our distance, as if afraid of each other. The distance in life extended into death, making me avoid the truth that I had lost my parents. Facing that loss would mean more pain than I ever imagined, so I blamed your mistakes to maintain that distance. The demon parents moved closer to me. I lowered the tip of the sword. My right hand gripped the hilt, my left hand clenched. I placed my fist on my father's chest, my palm pressed firmly against my mother's shoulder, holding them tight. I burst into tears, snot and tears mingling. For a moment, I wondered how many historical victories had been interrupted by such human weakness. I spoke louder, my voice steadier. But you two were wrong. Wrong to hide the truth from me. Wrong to keep your distance. My parents acted wrongly because they were still human. The two demonic figures tried to push my hands away, and I strained with all my might to hold them, knowing I could only last a few more seconds. I almost screamed, but I know, Mom and Dad, I know you loved me. I know, and I understand that love means nothing if it comes from perfection. It only truly has value when the subject can fail. And you two gave me the feeling of being loved. I choked back a sob, bursting into tears. My legs slipped, one knee hitting the stone floor. I couldn't hold them anymore. The sword clanged to the ground. Even though you didn't say it, I sobbed, I still felt that love. I sniffled, looking up at Goran. He stood watching, solemn, but there was one thing. You're right, Goran, I yelled, my voice echoing through the room. It's time to rise. I gathered momentum from my kneeling position, sprang up and pushed my demon parents hard. They shrieked, then fell backwards, crashing to the ground with disgusting, squelching sounds. I gagged, then raised my face high. Mom, Dad, I also kept my distance. I was wrong. I yelled at the ceiling, my voice echoing. I'm sorry, I forgive you too, completely. I felt a wave of relief surge from my heels to my shoulders. And I hope you too forgive me, and I hope you understand I've learned so much from you. My biggest regret in life is not letting go of these demons when you were alive, but I won't hold on to them anymore, no matter how painful letting go is. I lowered my head. The two entities were struggling to get up. I trembled as I continued. I also hope you understand that now I have the strength to see through everything you two left behind. In fact, I used to doubt myself. The demon parents had just stood up. I rushed forward, snatched the sword, then retreated a few steps. My mind was spinning. No more hesitation. Now was the time for action. Remember, we are often weakest in our strongest moments. Damn it, my father was so wise. But you two, I yelled at the two demonic figures, are not my parents. I swung the sword, screaming, they should be sipping chamomile tea right now. I slashed horizontally, severing my father's neck. Blood gushed out. He collapsed. And with Ginger too, I plunged the sword through my mother's neck, the tip emerging from the other side of her face. Her eyes bulged, stunned. I sharply withdrew the blade and she slumped down. I lowered the sword, still standing on my own 2 feet. I cried, unable to suppress the thought that flickered like sunlight on water. Perhaps power is simply learning to accept how little control you have. Would I be alone forever? Was loneliness an angel or a demon? Did I have countless other demons? Too many to count? Did I do the right thing or the wrong thing? I opened my eyes and saw Goran looking furious. Not afraid, but furious. He hadn't expected me to act that way. He only wanted me to stumble, hadn't prepared for the opposite scenario. Now he looked at me and I saw him clearly too. His hands burst with demon fire. He charged straight at me. Sweat, snot, tears, blood not mine. I didn't feel the aura of greatness at all, but that was all I had before this life or death moment. I also ran, slipping through the narrow gap between my parents' corpses on the floor. I knew they couldn't get up again. I remembered Goran's fiery form when I first encountered him. I remembered the terrible pain. I wasn't courageous, I just felt I had to do it. I did. A thought suddenly occurred to me. Perhaps that was the essence of my parents, doing what had to be done. The demon rushed forward, incredibly terrifying. Goran spread his hands, a sinister smile revealing a forked tongue ready to spew fire and incinerate me. If you are fighting an opponent who is stronger and better armed, Peter, be wise. Do not confront directly. You cannot overcome, so humble yourself. I lowered the tip of the sword, sliding it harmlessly between his legs on the stone floor. His eyes gleamed with pleasure. I dropped to the ground, rolled tightly, right to his feet. I slammed hard into Goran's knee. A second later, I heard the sound of bone. His head hit the floor with a loud thud. I scrambled up, ran back to where the sword had slid, grabbed it, then charged at Goran. He rolled over, his right arm, blazing with fire, sweeping across. There are no more demons hidden within me. I brought the sword down, severing his arm from the elbow down. Goran shrieked, blood spurting like a geyser, instantly igniting and burning his robe. He still managed to swing his left arm, still blazing at me. I cut off that forearm too, like slicing rotten meat. He gasped, screaming, then stopped, trying to regain his composure. "Wait, Peter, I want to talk," he gasped. "I underestimated you. You want to learn, right?" He propped himself up on his stumps, whimpering. "Yes, I know you hate me, Peter, but you are a rational person. Your parents were rational. Now your life has changed completely. There are countless things you need to know. I will teach you everything. I will show you everything, in exchange for my life." I saw tears welling in his eyes. I hesitated. He was right. Everything had changed. The people who should have taught me, who needed to teach me, were gone. There was no way to change that truth. My life would never be the same. There was a before, and this was after. He could impart all the knowledge that would shape my life from now on. I had one. Was it necessary to kill him? He saw my hesitation. "I know many things, Peter." His voice was weak but calm. "Tell me, without me, how will you learn?" I looked down at the one who had caused so much pain, now maimed by me. I raised the sword. "I guess I'll read it in the book." I plunged the sword through his skull, the tip emerging from the back. Goran let out one final shriek. His body immediately burst into flames, the heat terrifying, but I stood still, gripping the sword hilt, unmoving. The fierce flames quickly dissipated. Goran's scream dissolved into silence. Soon, I stood over a pile of ash. The demon was defeated. I knew my logic told me not to do it, but this time, logic lost. Right there on the spot where my enemy lay, I saw a bitter, irrepressible smile slowly appear on my lips. The night wind was a welcome antidote to the suffocating heat of hell. I glanced at Sebastian. He gazed at the eastern horizon, looking utterly at peace. The east was tinged with purple, gradually shifting to pink. I was exhausted. I offered Sebastian some strong liquor. He refused, saying he didn't touch alcohol. I offered coffee. He shook his head again for the same reason. So we sat on my parents' roof, watching the sunrise, sipping chamomile tea. The serene silence stretched on. Finally, I broke it. I wonder how long that metal door had been unlocked before I touched it. Would I have died down there if I hadn't killed Goran? Did I need to release more demons to escape? He took a sip of tea, continuing to look at the horizon. "Peter, before you went back and opened the door, did you really want it open any sooner?" I was stunned, unsure how to answer. Then I realized I had no words. "Thank you for waiting for me on the other side of the door." That was all I could say. I drained my tea. The sky gradually turned orange. The watch glass began to reflect a few rays, but my parents' book remained in shadow. "Are you going to read more, Peter?" Sebastian asked. I exhaled, setting the cup down. "No, not now." I looked for an explanation. "I believe they're still out there somewhere, whatever out there means." I leaned back, hugging my knees. "The book hasn't changed. It was written, but my experience hasn't." I sighed. "I don't have many things left of my parents. I don't want to use up what's left too soon. I should have realized that sooner." Sebastian sipped his tea. "What's past is irreversible, Peter." He turned to look at me. He looked exhausted too, but not tense. "There's no one left to punish for what happened. Don't volunteer to punish yourself." Then he looked back at the horizon. The orange faded to yellow. We were silent again for a few minutes. I spoke. "You know, I'm still surprised by how we met. I'm sure that's another story, and I'm just a small part of it." He nodded thoughtfully. You think all these stories will intertwine? He smiled. All rivers eventually flow to the sea. As the sun finally broke the horizon, I suddenly felt a wave of sleepiness, rubbing my tired eyes. What about you, Peter? Sebastian asked. Are you going to find out more about your parents or let it all go? I smiled. No, I replied. No, there's no turning back now. This is only the beginning.